The summer heat shimmered off the blacktop as I stepped out of my private jet onto the tarmac of the small regional airport just outside Asheville, North Carolina. I hadn't set foot in the state for nearly 10 years, not since the day I left my family behind, with nothing but a duffel bag, a scholarship letter, and a heart full of determination. Now, I was back, but I wasn't the same person who'd driven away in a rusted-out Honda Civic with tears in her eyes. I was Ava Montgomery, CEO and founder of Orion Quantum Systems, one of the most disruptive technology firms in the world. And I was here because my father, the same man who once told me I was a disgrace to the Montgomery name, was on the verge of losing everything. Miss Montgomery, my driver said as he opened the door to my Bentley SUV. I nodded, slipped on my sunglasses, and settled into the leather seat, my mind already racing through what I was about to face. 10 years ago, I'd been the youngest of 5 children in a conservative, deeply traditional family that built its reputation in Southern textile manufacturing. My father, Charles Montgomery, III, was a man of legacy, rules, and rigid expectations. He expected his sons to run the business and his daughters to marry well. I was supposed to attend finishing school, then quietly marry some banker or senator's son. Instead, I fell in love with theoretical physics. When I told him I'd been accepted to MIT on a full scholarship, he didn't congratulate me. He didn't even look up from his glass of scotch. A woman like you doesn't need an education like that, he had said coldly. We don't waste our legacy on foolish dreams. The argument that followed still echoed in my memory. You're embarrassing the family, he'd shouted. You'll regret this. He was wrong. By the time I was 30, I'd founded Orion Quantum with a former professor, raised millions in funding, and developed a quantum encryption algorithm that reshaped global cybersecurity. We signed defense contracts, Fortune 100 clients, and eventually went public. I was now worth over $60 million personally, but I kept my success quiet, especially from my family. Not out of fear, but because they didn't deserve to know. Then last week, I received a letter, a real stamped handwritten letter, from my oldest brother, Nathan. Ava, I know we haven't spoken in years, but I'm writing you because we need help. Dad's in trouble. The business is collapsing. The banks are closing in, and he's asking for you. Please come home. My fingers had trembled as I read those words, not from sadness, from fury. The same man who had disowned me was now asking for my help. I didn't reply. I simply made the necessary calls and arranged my return. The house came into view: Montgomery Hall, a sprawling estate built in the 1800s, nestled in the hills like a relic of a forgotten empire. As the gates opened, I stared at the peeling paint, the broken shutters, the empty fountain. It was a monument to pride and decay. As I stepped onto the gravel path, the front door opened and my mother appeared, thinner than I remembered, her once flawless makeup smudged by age and worry. Ava, she gasped. Hello, Mother, I said, evenly. Is Father home? She nodded, swallowing emotion. He's in the study. He's not well. I'm not here to reminisce, I replied. I'm here to see for myself what's left of the empire I was never good enough to inherit. She flinched at the bitterness in my voice but stepped aside. He's waiting for you. The halls I walked through had once been off limits to me after that night I'd left. Portraits of my ancestors stared down disapprovingly, but I no longer cared. Let them judge. I'd built more than they could have imagined. In the study, my father sat slumped in his armchair, surrounded by old ledgers and stacks of overdue notices. He looked up as I entered. His face was thinner, older, but the pride was still there in his posture. Ava, he said simply. Charles, I replied, refusing to call him father. He raised an eyebrow. So, you've come. I came to see what rock bottom looks like for the man who thought I wasn't worthy of his name. Silence stretched between us. I was wrong, he finally said, voice hoarse. I know, I said. Let's begin with the truth. Show me everything, every debt, every asset, every lie you told to keep this place afloat. He hesitated. Because if you don't, I continued, I'll walk out that door and let the Montgomery name vanish into bankruptcy. His hand shook as he reached for a folder. I took it without flinching. It was time to turn the tables. The manila folder in my hands felt heavier than it should have. Inside was the wreckage of a dynasty, balance sheets inked in red, foreclosure notices, court summons. The Montgomery empire was imploding, and the patriarch who once scorned me was sitting in the eye of the storm, waiting to see if his exiled daughter would rescue him. I flipped through the documents methodically, my expression unreadable. Decades of mismanagement, risky investments, and refusal to modernize had turned what was once a $200 million company into a sinking ship with less than 6 months of operational runway. There were outstanding loans totaling $9.3 million, several of which had ballooned due to predatory interest rates. Payroll had been delayed for 3 consecutive quarters. Key assets, warehouses, trucks, equipment had already been quietly sold to cover monthly expenses. You kept up appearances, I murmured, not looking at him. We had to, my father replied. This family, this name, it carries weight. You don't understand what it means to lie to everyone, to pretend you still mattered? I snapped, slapping the folder closed. You built an empire on appearances, father, and when it started to crumble, you chose pride over transparency. He sank back in his chair, deflated. There wasn't anyone else I could go to. Correction. There wasn't anyone else willing to come back. He didn't argue. I stood and paced the room slowly, remembering the years I spent in this house trying to earn his approval. I'd brought home science fair ribbons, straight A report cards, even early scholarship offers. None of it had been enough. He only cared about tradition, about grooming sons to be businessmen and daughters to be bargaining chips in society. I built something without you, I said quietly, without your money, without your permission, and now I'm the only Montgomery with the resources to keep this name from becoming a bankruptcy headline. His eyes flicked up, hopeful. You'll help then? I stopped and turned to face him. I didn't say that. I said I'm the only one who can. Whether I will, depends. He frowned. Depends on what? On whether you're ready to. Stop pretending this is still your kingdom. My voice cut through the room like ice. You want me to step down? He asked. No, I replied. I want you to admit that you were wrong. About the business. About your sons. About me. A muscle twitched in his jaw. For a man like Charles Montgomery, that kind of humility was the equivalent of bleeding in public. But the silence that followed told me he understood. He just didn't know how to say the words. You don't have to answer now, I added, pulling my phone from my bag. Because whether you admit it or not, I've already started the process. My legal team is reviewing your debt structure. We'll determine what can be refinanced, what must be paid, and what can be written off. He blinked. So, you're saving us? I met his eyes. No, I'm saving the legacy, not you. There was a knock at the door. My brother Nathan stepped in, face pale, clearly not expecting to see me standing tall in my designer heels, calm and poised. Ava? He breathed. You came. I nodded. Where are the others? Elliot and Marcus are on their way, he said. They're skeptical. Let them be, I replied. I'm not here for their comfort. Nathan studied me, his expression softening. You look different. I am different. I watched him shift uneasily as he took a seat beside our father. I always thought you were brave, you know, Nathan said quietly. To leave, to chase what you believed. And I didn't have the guts to follow you. You didn't need guts, I said. You needed backbone. He laughed, a humorless sound. Still blunt, I see. I didn't respond. I was already scrolling through emails from my legal team. My lead financial strategist, Kara, had forwarded an initial summary. Montgomery Textiles has enough asset equity to restructure 40% of the debt under new terms. Remaining liabilities can be settled via liquidation or acquisition. Recommend establishing Ava Montgomery as majority stakeholder to ensure operational control. I handed the phone to my father. He read it twice, his hands trembling slightly. You want control, he murmured. I demand it, I corrected. If I'm going to save this company, it'll be under my leadership. You'll resign publicly. You'll name me your successor. And you'll issue a statement apologizing for your prior opposition to new leadership perspectives. He looked like I'd just asked him to carve out his own heart. This is extortion, he whispered. No, I replied coldly. This is justice. Nathan rubbed his face. You'll destroy him. No, I said, staring hard at my father. I'm rebuilding what he destroyed. And if he has a shred of decency left, he'll hand me the bricks and step aside. The study fell silent. I'll need time, my father finally said. You've had 10 years, I replied, gathering the folder. You'll give me your answer by tomorrow, or I walk away, and the Montgomery name dissolves with the next court notice. And with that, I turned and left the room. As I walked through the grand hallway of Montgomery Hall, a house built on tradition and arrogance, I felt none of the fear I once had. because this time, I was holding the blueprints, and I was about to rebuild everything on my terms. The next morning, I awoke to a message from Kara, my chief financial strategist, Ava, confirming we've scheduled meetings with the creditor banks. Legal recommends drafting preliminary shareholder transfer agreements ASAP. Also, your father's attorney requested a meeting today at a.m. I sipped my espresso slowly, watching the skyline through the windows of my penthouse. My father's silence since yesterday spoke volumes. He was calculating, weighing his pride against his crumbling empire. But he was running out of time and out of choices. By 10:45, I arrived at the law office of Hargrove and Penn, the firm that had served the Montgomery family for generations. The receptionist looked startled to see me. Miss Montgomery, your father is inside, along with his attorney, Mr. Wexler. I know. They're expecting me. The boardroom was a study in mahogany and masculine arrogance. My father stood, when I entered, looking as if he hadn't slept. His lawyer, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, gestured for me to sit. We've reviewed your proposal, Wexler began, sliding a thick stack of documents across the table. I glanced at the title page, Transfer of Executive Authority and Ownership, Montgomery Textiles, Inc. My father cleared his throat. I've agreed to your terms. No fight, no argument, no last-minute power play, just quiet submission. I raised an eyebrow. That easy. He looked away. What choice do I have? I built something that's crumbling, and you're the only one who knows how to fix it. A ping of something, maybe pity, maybe resentment tugged at my chest, but I stuffed it down. This wasn't the time for softness. You'll sign the announcement? I asked. Yes. And the public apology? He nodded once. It's in the draft. My communications team is finalizing it now. I turned to Wexler. Then we're done here. Back in my office, Kara was waiting with the full acquisition model. Once the documents are signed, you'll officially control 62% of Montgomery Textiles, she said. That gives you full veto power. We can rebrand under your name or keep the legacy, depending on your PR strategy. I thought for a moment. We keep the name but we bury the past. Understood, she said. Also, Elliot and Marcus just requested meetings. Of course they did. By mid-afternoon, I met with my brothers separately, starting with Marcus, the family golden boy who once called me a waste of oxygen when I turned down my father's plan. He stepped into the room in a slim-cut suit and a fake smile. Ava, congratulations on your little coup. It wasn't a coup, I said coolly. It was a rescue mission. He laughed without humor. So what now? You're going to play CEO and pretend you belong in the big leagues? I slid a folder across the table. That's a 5-year plan for restructuring the company, restoring profitability, and expanding into sustainable fabrics and AI-powered logistics. The team that wrote it? Ex-McKinsey, MIT, and Deloitte. And me. He opened it. His expression changed. You wrote this? Every line. He exhaled slowly. You were always smarter than we gave you credit for. No, I corrected him. I was always smarter than you were willing to admit. We sat in silence for a beat. Finally, Marcus leaned forward. So what happens to us? To me and Elliot? You're shareholders, I said, but not executives. If you want to keep your dividends, you stay out of my way. If you want a job, you'll have to apply like everyone else. His jaw tensed, but he nodded. Fair. Next came Elliot. Of all of them, he had been the cruelest, the most vocal when they pushed me out, the one who'd laughed when I left with nothing but a duffel bag and a dream. Look at you, he said as he walked in, all grown up and terrifying. I didn't bother responding. I'm not here to fight, he added, raising his hands. Just to say, we underestimated you, all of us, and I'm sorry. That stopped me, not because I forgave him, but because I hadn't expected it. I'm not asking for anything, he said. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to hear it. I studied him. Elliot wasn't a man given to humility. If he'd come here just to admit fault, maybe, just maybe, he meant it. Thank you, I said softly. He gave me a small smile. So, do we get to keep the family crest on the stationery? No, I replied. The future doesn't wear coats of arms. That night, alone in my office, I stood before the massive portrait of my great-grandfather, founder of Montgomery Textiles. He'd built it with calloused hands and grit. My father had nearly ruined it with ego and denial. And now I would rebuild it with technology, precision, and a ruthless focus on the future. The press release dropped the next morning. Ava Montgomery named CEO of Montgomery Textiles Inc. Charles Montgomery steps down, citing desire to empower a new generation. The article was diplomatic, polished, sanitized, but anyone who read between the lines could see the truth. The black sheep was back, and she wasn't here to play nice. The media storm hit within hours. Tech blogs, fashion magazines, even business TV segments all buzzing with one headline: Disgraced heiress becomes CEO of family empire Montgomery dynasty reborn. I let them run with it. Every reporter wanted an exclusive. Every investor wanted a meeting. And every enemy wanted to know how a girl they once called a failure had just pulled off the most calculated corporate resurrection in decades. But I didn't do it for headlines. I did it for control. And I wasn't finished yet. 3 days after the announcement, I walked into the Montgomery headquarters wearing a tailored black suit and a calm, lethal smile. The front desk staff fell silent as I passed. The same people who once whispered about me as the odd daughter now watched me like I was royalty. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Kara was already waiting in the executive suite. She handed me a list. These are the top 50 managers you should meet. 20 of them were loyal to your father. 10 actively tried to block your takeover. 3 still think you'll fail. I scanned the list. Schedule them all. One-on-one meetings. 20 minutes each. She raised an eyebrow. All 50? Yes. I want them to see me, hear me, understand that this isn't temporary. Kara nodded. Understood. The meetings began at 9 o'clock a.m. sharp the next morning. I shook hands. I listened. I took notes. I looked every one of them in the eye and made it clear. The days of chaos were over. Some were skeptical. Some were terrified. A few, surprisingly, were impressed. But I didn't need their approval, just their cooperation. After the final meeting, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This view, once reserved only for my father, was now mine. I had earned it. Should I start drafting the restructuring memo? Kara asked behind me. Yes, I said. And I want to make 3 things clear. I held up a finger. 1. We're eliminating all dead weight roles within 60 days. No exceptions. Another finger. 2. The company will shift to fully sustainable materials by Q4 of next year. And a third. 3. Anyone caught discriminating on gender, race, age, background will be fired. No warnings. Kira's lips curled into a smile. Revolutionary. No, I said. Necessary. That night, I visited the penthouse my father used to own. It had sat empty since the company's finances began collapsing, and now it was technically mine. I walked through the vast marble halls, memories flooding back, some painful, some sweet. In the study, I found the drawer where he once kept letters and old contracts. I opened it slowly. There, tucked behind a crumbling ledger, was a letter addressed to me. Ava, if you're reading this, then I've either died or been forced to step aside. I don't know which is worse. You were never the daughter I imagined. You were too curious, too independent, too unwilling to be molded. But perhaps that's what this company needs now. If you're in charge, I hope you'll take what I built and make it stronger, better, smarter. I never said it out loud, but I was proud of you, even when I didn't understand you. Don't let the board manipulate you. Don't let your brothers stall your vision. And above all, don't forget that you're a Montgomery. You're stronger than you know. Dottie sat down slowly, the weight of the words pressing into my chest. He hadn't been kind, or fair, or just, but maybe, in some small way, he had known I would rise, and now I had. The next morning, I walked into the first Montgomery board meeting as its chairwoman. The 12 members, all older men in expensive suits, looked at me with a mix of unease and curiosity. I began simply, this is no longer your company. This is our company. But make no mistake, I'm driving the vision. One of the board members raised his hand. And what exactly is that vision, Miss Montgomery? I smiled. To turn this legacy into a future-facing empire. To lead not with nostalgia, but with innovation. To make us relevant again and unstoppable. They didn't clap. They didn't nod. But they didn't argue. Because they knew something had shifted. The girl they'd once dismissed as the black sheep was no longer in the shadows. She was leading the charge, and she wasn't asking for permission. It didn't take long for the resistance to show. 3 weeks into my leadership, whispers turned into open pushback. 2 regional VPs resigned suddenly. A dozen department heads leaked misleading numbers to investors. One anonymous article called Me, a trust fund brat playing CEO. They thought I'd fold. They didn't know me at all. I responded the only way I knew how, by tightening the reins and drawing blood where it hurt. First, I brought in an outside audit team to comb through every department's finances. Within a week, we uncovered millions in waste, backdoor bonuses, and misfiled expenses. I didn't just fire the offenders, I publicly named them in the company newsletter. Then I did something bolder. I opened the books to every employee in the company. This is what our executive team has been hiding from you, I said in a live stream viewed by over 10,000 Montgomery employees worldwide. These are the bonuses they gave themselves while cutting your healthcare. These are the departments they neglected while demanding more from you. My inbox flooded with support. The media had a field day. Ava Montgomery declares war on old money greed. But the real blow came at the shareholders meeting. I stood at the podium, flanked by Kara and my CFO, and laid out the full transformation plan: digital modernization, expanded sustainable product lines, a diversity-driven hiring initiative, and an aggressive shift toward direct-to-consumer models. One elderly shareholder stood up. "And what makes you think you can deliver this, young lady?" I smiled. "Because I already have." I clicked the remote. The screen behind me changed to a chart showing Montgomery stock soaring 47% since my appointment. Silence, then applause. When the meeting ended, a crowd formed around me, people who'd once called me a liability now asking for selfies and sound bites. But not everyone was happy. As I walked out, I saw them: my mother, my brother Daniel, and beside them, my father's longtime attorney, Paul Hartwell. My mother stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You've made quite a spectacle of yourself." "Only if you consider honesty a spectacle," I replied coolly. "You humiliated this family," Daniel snapped. "The Montgomery name used to mean something." "It still does," I said. "It just doesn't mean covering up corruption anymore." Paul stepped forward. "We need to talk privately." We found an empty conference room. He closed the door and handed me a manila envelope. "Your father updated his will a few months before he died," Paul said, "but he never filed the final version." I opened the envelope. It was a letter in my father's handwriting. "Ava, I see now that I was wrong. About you. About everything. I spent my life trying to shape you into something you never were, and in the process, I almost broke you. If you're reading this, I hope you've taken the reins. I hope you're stronger than I was. I wanted to leave you everything, but I also wanted you to take it first. Make them remember who you are. Make me proud." Dottie folded the letter slowly, my throat tight. He hadn't handed it to me, but he'd left the pieces for me to claim it, and I had. "Is this why Daniel's angry?" I asked. "Because the will proves what he refused to admit, that our father saw something in me he never saw in him." Paul didn't answer. He didn't need to. I stood. "Tell them they can stay out of my way, or they can watch me build the future without them." When I returned to my office, Kara was waiting. "There's something you should see," she said. She turned on the screen. Live news footage. Ava Montgomery's reign. The future of family empires. They were calling me a revolutionary, a disruptor, the comeback kid. But I didn't care about the headlines anymore. I looked out over the city, the same skyline my father once ruled. Now it was mine, and I had one final move to make. 1 year later, the transformation was complete. Montgomery Industries wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Profits were up 120%. We'd launched 2 successful product lines in renewable tech, and our AI supply chain optimization platform had become a model across the industry. The headlines had shifted from skepticism to reverence. How Ava Montgomery revived a dying dynasty. From heiress to titan, the black sheep's billion-dollar turnaround. But for me, the most satisfying moment came not in a boardroom but on a stage. I was the keynote speaker at the Global Innovation Summit, standing in front of a packed auditorium filled with the very people who once dismissed me. My talk was simple. "I'm not here because of privilege," I said. "I'm here because I refuse to let privilege define me." Legacy doesn't mean following someone else's path. It means building your own and daring others to follow. The standing ovation wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed was the look on my mother's face when she approached me afterward, her perfect pearls and icy composure replaced by something fragile. "I watched your speech," she said. "You were brilliant." "Thank you," I replied, neither cold nor warm. She hesitated. "I never imagined I'd be proud of you for this. For anything like this." I nodded, offering the faintest smile. That's the difference between us. I never needed your imagination, just the room to become who I am. She said nothing as she turned and left. That was fine. Closure doesn't always come as an apology. Sometimes it comes in clarity. Later that month, I stood in front of the newly unveiled Montgomery Center for Ethical Innovation, a project I'd funded with a personal donation of $100 million. It was built not on the family estate, but on the grounds of one of our oldest abandoned warehouses. A phoenix, born from the ashes of the old world, the plaque outside read, "Dedicated to those told they weren't enough. Build anyway." I pressed my hand to the stone, a final, silent goodbye to the version of myself who once begged for their approval. Inside, students from underserved communities were already gathered, young minds ready to learn AI, sustainability, design thinking. I saw a little girl with braids holding a prototype she'd built out of spare parts. She looked up and smiled at me, and I smiled back, because revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes, it looks like creation. Sometimes, the best way to defeat the people who tried to break you is to build something so brilliant they can never look away again. And that's exactly what I did.